a Grand Prix that I have ever seen in the whole of my life.
As the renowned voice of motorsport, Murray Walker stood witness to the unfolding spectacle. He was momentarily rendered speechless by the event before him. It's doubtful that there has ever been, or perhaps ever will be, a race in the annals of Formula One that has delivered the sheer level of suspense and unpredictability as witnessed during the 1998 Belgian Grand Prix. From a staggering collision involving 13 cars to astonishing crashes, a genuine scuffle in the pit lane, the fierce battle between the Schumacher siblings, and a first-ever victory for one of the sport's emerging dark horses, this race truly had it all. Qualifying commenced with a palpable sense of anticipation as optimal track conditions on Saturday, cool and dry, set the stage. The session was dominated by an electrifying duel, with Mika Häkkinen and David Coulthard in their McLarens vying for the spotlight. Every time Coulthard clocked a faster lap, Häkkinen would retaliate, slicing off a few more tenths from his time.
And Häkkinen immediately goes quicker, 1/10 of a second quicker.
Ultimately, it was Häkkinen who clinched the pole position by a slender margin of 1/10 of a second, ensuring a front-row start for McLaren with Coulthard. Meanwhile, Damon Hill delivered an impressive qualifying run to secure the third position on the grid, outpacing both Michael Schumacher and Eddie Irvine, who settled into fourth and fifth places respectively. Schumacher's fastest lap was subject to close scrutiny following an incident involving waved yellow flags. Nonetheless, Hill narrowly eclipsed him by a mere fraction of a second.
P3, Damon Hill, what a fantastic lap, absolutely!
Amidst the frontrunners, other drivers also encountered their own set of trials. Jacques Villeneuve, in particular, secured an impressive sixth place on the starting grid, overcoming the adversity of nearly damaging his Williams in the preceding day's session. Mika Salo's qualifying session was marred by misfortune as he crashed his Arrows car, and this was merely a precursor to the further difficulties he would encounter once the race commenced. Race day proved to be a tumultuous affair, defying all expectations. Despite forecasts suggesting warm and dry weather, rain began to fall early on Saturday morning, catching everyone off guard. It was an ironic twist, given Spa's reputation for its unpredictable weather. A place where it's almost expected to rain, isn't it?
Looks like rain again.
The downpour became the stage for Schumacher's mastery as he demonstrated his prowess in wet conditions during the warm-up. He led the timings in his Ferrari with teammate Irvine trailing close behind. Following the Scarlet duo were Häkkinen, Fisichella, Ralf Schumacher, and Hill, each showcasing their skills in the challenging conditions. As the race commenced, the weather's fickle nature was on full display. A select few drivers, including Villeneuve, Alesi, and notably Michael Schumacher, gambled on intermediate tires. In contrast, others such as Häkkinen, Coulthard, Hill, and Irvine opted for full wets in a bid for security. Yet as events would unfold, this race was to be anything but predictable or secure.
And they will all arrive there in one mighty 22-car lump.
As the lights went out, Häkkinen got off the line well, but Coulthard faltered at the start. Villeneuve, seizing the opportunity, surged forward to press Häkkinen for the lead. Hill, suffering from excessive wheel spin, slipped down to around 7th from his third-place start, which allowed Michael Schumacher to advance to third position. The front-runners had a relatively smooth start, but it was further back where chaos broke loose. The rooster tails of spray thrown up by the cars and the wet conditions rendered visibility nearly nil, obscuring the precise details of the incident as it happened. It was suspected, however, that Irvine clipped Coulthard, sending the McLaren careening into the midst of the pack. On the approach to Eau Rouge, the aftermath was severe, culminating in a significant collision with the concrete barriers. It was a harrowing scene to see a car spinning uncontrollably across the circuit, while the following drivers desperately maneuvered to avoid the impending havoc. The resulting melee left drivers like Barrichello, Rosset, Panis, and Sattler with such extensively damaged cars that they were unable to participate in the race restart. Fortunately, despite the severity of the crash, all of the drivers involved emerged without serious injury. It required almost an hour to remove the debris and prepare the spare cars for the race to be restarted. Irvine assumed the wheel of Schumacher's backup Ferrari, while Coulthard switched to the spare McLaren. In the midst of the initial turmoil, Ralf Schumacher was one of the few who navigated the chaos unscathed, skillfully steering his Jordan to avoid the wreckage. As the drivers assembled for the restart, the grid was notably diminished, with only 18 drivers poised to take on the race once again. At the restart, Hill grasped the chance to rectify his earlier misstart. Nailing the launch, he surged past both McLarens as they rounded La Source, propelling himself into a leading position.
Damon Hill gets ahead of everybody at La Source.
While Hill found himself in an inviolable lead, Häkkinen was left to navigate through a scenario far from ideal, his race beginning to unravel like a nightmare. Häkkinen's McLaren executed an abrupt 180-degree spin as he was exiting La Source, leaving him stationary and facing the oncoming traffic. In a moment of helplessness, he could only watch as Johnny Herbert's Sauber crashed into him.
I did not see that coming!
The impact forced both drivers were out of the race, which in turn necessitated the deployment of the safety car onto the circuit. Compounding McLaren's woes, Coulthard faced his own set of troubles in the first lap, fighting for control and subsequently ending up in the gravel trap after a tangle with Alexander Wurzelbenetton. Fortuitously, he managed to extricate his car and re-enter the race, albeit from the very back of the field. With the safety car in control, the revised top 10 running order consisted of Hill, Michael Schumacher, Irvine, Alesi, Villeneuve, Frentzen, Ralf Schumacher, Fisichella, Diniz, and Verstappen. No, not the one you might think of, though given the unpredictable nature of this race, nothing could be discounted. This lineup was established after the track was cleared of the stranded Sauber and McLaren. The race got back underway just 2 laps after the interruption with Hill's Jordan, equipped with intermediate tires in anticipation of a drying circuit, initially appearing poised and in command amidst the evolving weather. He maintained a slender lead over Schumacher's Ferrari during the opening 10 laps, with just over a second separating them. However, as the rain intensified, it soon became apparent that Hill's Jordan was finding it difficult to match the pace in the deteriorating conditions. Seeing Hill at the forefront in the Jordan was an unexpected twist, but by lap 7, Schumacher executed a decisive maneuver. He outbraked Hill at the bus stop chicane, seizing the lead. As the race continued, Jos Verstappen, driving for Stewart, experienced an engine failure, leading to his retirement on lap 8. Irvine encountered his own set of problems on lap 9, damaging his front wing and bargeboard after misjudging a chicane and striking the curb. This necessitated a protracted pit stop for repairs and a tire change to full wets to better handle the conditions. Ralf Schumacher, meanwhile, made a tactical decision on lap 11 to switch from intermediate to full wet tires, a choice that would later be vindicated as the race conditions evolved.
Genius. Want to play?
At times, the genius of strategy can be almost spine-tingling. On lap 16, the majority of the leading drivers, including Jacques Villeneuve, who was on intermediates, opted to pit for full wet tires, or at least attempted to do so. In a rather adventurous twist, Villeneuve had an unplanned encounter with the barriers just before his planned pit stop. Damon Hill's pit stop didn't go off without a hitch either, as the mechanics had to make adjustments to the front wing settings. However, they successfully completed the adjustments, albeit with a minor hiccup. By lap 17, Hill found himself sandwiched between the 2 Schumachers on the track. Michael Schumacher had established a comfortable lead over Hill, with Ralf Schumacher trailing in 3rd place, undoubtedly thankful for his earlier strategic tire change. Alesi, Frentzen, Irvine, Dennis, and Fisichella followed suit in the top positions. Coulthard, however, grew increasingly frustrated with the challenging conditions and vocalized his desire for the safety car's return. As events unfolded, his intuition would later be vindicated, as by lap 24, his foresight proved correct. Ralf Schumacher had significantly narrowed the gap to his teammate, Damon Hill, reducing it to just a 10-second difference. In contrast, Michael Schumacher continued to extend his lead over Hill, now boasting an advantage of nearly 30 seconds. It was on this very lap that Michael came perilously close to a collision with Diniz. For those familiar with the concept of foreshadowing, it was a moment that hinted at what was to come, underscoring how foreshadowing can sometimes be rather overt and obvious. Michael Schumacher continued his charge and soon approached Coulthard, who was on the verge of being lapped. Tensions mounted as Schumacher expressed his frustration with the McLaren obstructing his path. This impatience would eventually escalate into seething anger on lap 26.
Obviously.
And sometimes tragedy.
Disaster unfolded as Schumacher's right front wheel collided with Coulthard's rear while attempting to overtake the Scotsman in the treacherous conditions. In these challenging circumstances, Michael Schumacher's Ferrari sustained significant damage due to the incident.
Michael Schumacher hits David Coulthard and is out of the Belgian Grand Prix.
Frustration had overwhelmed the German driver in the perilous conditions. Both cars continued, but Michael's race came to an unfortunate end. He had held a commanding lead of more than 30 seconds, seemingly on the path to securing his pursuit of the driver's title, but it all unraveled in a fleeting moment. His anger had reached such a boiling point that upon returning to the pit, he flung his steering wheel in frustration toward his mechanic. Exiting the car, he stormed over to the McLaren garage with a singular focus. There, he confronted Coulthard, who still had his helmet on. Schumacher was utterly convinced that Coulthard was the sole culprit for whatever had transpired on the track. I must emphasize, the exchange between them was nothing short of fiery. Coulthard later described how Schumacher was seething with anger, leveling some rather grave accusations. We're talking about allegations along the lines of trying to harm me. Matters escalated to such a degree that the Ferrari and McLaren crews had to intervene, physically separating the two impassioned drivers. Indeed, this unfolding drama was akin to what you might label as pure cinema, a real spectacle. However, the German driver wasn't finished just yet. He stormed off to the steward's office to formally file a protest against Coulthard. Later, David Coulthard expressed his views on Michael Schumacher's actions, deeming it disgusting behavior from someone with such an illustrious track record in the sport.
They're blemishes and unnecessary. And I said, well, surely you're wrong sometimes.
Coulthard emphasized the need for Schumacher to seek assistance in managing his anger. After such a remarkable turn of events, it's safe to say that the excitement level had skyrocketed. Just as I mentioned earlier, with 19 laps left in the race, Damon Hill had reclaimed the lead. However, there was a surprising twist in the narrative. Despite Michael Schumacher's accident, the possibility of a Schumacher victory was still very much alive. Ralf Schumacher, demonstrating that wet weather prowess ran in the family, had steadily made his way up the ranks and secured third place before his brother's unfortunate incident. He had even managed to whittle down Hill's lead from 22 seconds to just over 10 at one point. That unfortunate turn of events occurred when the safety car was called out following a collision involving Giancarlo Fisichella and Shinji Nakano. Ralf found himself in a prime position to restart the race directly behind Hill as the safety car withdrew with 12 laps remaining. For Jordan, a remarkable opportunity unfolded. Not only the prospect of victory, but also the potential for a 1-2 finish, a historic first for the team in a season where they hadn't managed to secure a position higher than fourth. Ralf, spurred on by his engineer Sam Michael, swiftly settled into a strong rhythm during the restart. He began to exert pressure on Hill as the race entered its final stages, all while the rain continued to pour down. Hill began to sense the mounting pressure, and with the demeanor of a reigning world champion, he conveyed his message clearly to the team over the radio. Today, if we wait, if we don't act right, we could end up with nothing. Jordan, taking its time to deliberate, weighed all the variables, including Ralph's contract negotiations for the following year. Eventually, he made the decision to implement team orders, instructing Ralf not to attempt to overtake Damon. Ralph's engineer, Sam Michael, made several attempts to convey this message to him, but it's safe to say that Ralf wasn't pleased with the directive. No, God, please, no, no. Yet, there was no acknowledgement, just silence. It marked the fourth attempt, but eventually he managed to establish communication with the German driver, who responded with a succinct two-word reply. Despite the team's orders, there lingered a sense that Ralf might choose to disregard them, particularly given his ongoing legal action against Jordan, seeking release from his contract to join Williams next year. Eddie Irvine's race came to an abrupt end as his Ferrari spun off the track and into the gravel after making contact with a curb. With this incident, both Ferraris were now out of contention. Ralf Schumacher demonstrated his commitment to the team's orders, while Alesi attempted to apply pressure from behind, albeit without success. Frentzen and Diniz found themselves unable to match the pace of the leading trio, and Giancarlo managed to secure a valuable point for Prost. Although he found himself 2 laps behind the leaders, the adage "slow and steady wins the race" held true as he secured a 6th-place finish. The race reached its conclusion on lap 44, with Damon Hill jubilantly celebrating his historic victory for Jordan, marking their first-ever Grand Prix win. In a remarkable 1-2 finish, Eddie Jordan's elation was palpable as he performed a now-famous dance in the paddock. Schumacher's frustration was evident, mirroring the earlier scene with his brother in the McLaren garage. He had been deprived of a potential first win, and although he participated in the celebrations by waving his cap and spraying champagne, a sense of grievance lingered. In fact, his frustration was so profound that he even disrupted Jordan's post-race festivities, vehemently stating that Ralf would never drive for Jordan again. Or those of you who may be curious, it's worth noting that he did indeed act on that threat. Ralf would go on to secure one last podium for Jordan at the race in Monza before departing from the team to join Williams, where he would spend a total of 6 years. Meanwhile, Michael narrowly missed out on a 3rd world title, losing to Häkkinen in the final race of the season. Had he emerged victorious at Spa, he would have entered the title showdown at Suzuka with a comfortable 6-point lead, rather than facing a 4-point deficit. Ultimately, the race saw only 8 out of 22 cars reach the finish line, with a staggering 13 out of 14 cars forced to retire due to various collisions or damage. Remarkably, the sole driver who retired on track due to a mechanical failure was Esteban Suarez of the Minardi. He fought valiantly, and he must have felt immensely grateful to his guardian angels for that stroke of luck. Spa 1998 wasn't just a thrilling race orchestrated by the F1 scriptwriters. It also held significant implications for the Drivers' Championship. I have strong reservations about the likelihood of witnessing a race of this caliber again, particularly given the modern approach of the FIA, which tends to favor running a couple of laps in the wet and then calling off the race.
Reality was that it was a day I shall never ever forget.
That said, if you found this video enjoyable, I invite you to explore another one I created delving into the greatest Formula One season of all time.